Let's dive straight in and use the ArcGIS API for Python to create a feature service in ArcGIS Online. Now our feature service will be empty. There'll be no feature layers or tables. We will add those in a later video. So open up the create service.py script from the create folder. From the GIS object, we can access the content manager and use the create service method to create a feature service in ArcGIS Online using the ArcGIS API for Python. Let's head over to the documentation for the create service method. Here we see the create service method, and there are quite a number of parameters laid out in front of us. We're only going to use 4 of them in our workflow. We're going to use the required name parameter. It is a string. We're going to use a WKID as we want to set the extent of our feature service. We'll set the service type to be feature service, and we're also going to use the item properties, which is an optional dictionary, and we can see below for the keys and values. We'll set a description, a title, some tags, the snippet, and the extent. The create service method returns an item object. If the item is successfully created, the item object is returned for the service. Let's head back to the script. Just to note, we are creating an empty feature service that will contain no feature layers or tables. We're going to add feature layers and tables in future videos. At the top of our script, we have imported the GIS class, and we use this GIS class to access our ArcGIS Online organization. Here I'm using the home string. I'm assigning the calling of the GIS class to a variable called AGOL. Now I've set up some user-defined variables, similar to the previous video where we checked if a service name is available for use. We have our service name and we have our service type. We create a variable called WKID and set it to 4326, which is WGS84. Then we're going to set some item properties, which is that optional dictionary that we saw in the documentation. I'm going to set an extent, which is a string of comma delimited coordinates from our xmin, ymin, xmax, and ymax. And this should be the extent for Ireland. Our snippet property is the summary that we'll see on the content item page once this feature service is created. We'll set that as feature service summary. We'll also have a description as feature service description. We'll set some tags, which is a list of strings. You can optionally add license info. Here I'll set it as feature service terms of use, and access information, which is the feature service attribution. Now we want to check if our feature service name that we wish to create is available. So we use the if statement, and we're accessing our GIS object and the content manager, and using the is service name available method. We supply in our service name and our service type. And if that returns true, we'll print the feature service name is available for use. And then we're going to create the empty feature service. If the feature service name already exists, therefore not available, we'll print the feature service name is not available for use. If the feature service name is available for use, then we're going to create an empty feature service. We'll create a variable called empty service item, and we'll set that to equal our GIS object and the content manager, and we are using the create service method that we saw the documentation for. We're going to set the name parameter to be our service name above, and we'll also set the service type to be our service type variable above. We'll set the WKID to be our WKID, and our item properties to be our item properties dictionary. The create service method returns what's known as an item object, and we'll be discussing the item object in the next few videos. Our item object will be assigned to a variable called empty service item. We're going to print that variable to screen, and we're also going to print the ID property for the item object. So I'll run this script. We can see that the feature service name was available for use. An item object was returned from the create service method. The title of the item was given the same name as the service, and it is of type feature layer collection. Now, feature layer collection is a feature service. In later videos, we are going to see the feature layer collection object that provides access to a feature service using the ArcGIS API for Python. This is the item ID of the item of content that was created that represents the feature service. I highly recommend that you copy this and paste it into a notepad, as we are going to be using it throughout this course. For now, I'll pop on over to ArcGIS Online. Here I'm in my content page for all my content. When I refresh, we're going to see the new feature service added here. So I'll refresh the page. And we can see that we now have a new feature layer hosted called prj_fdm_created service that we created from our Python script. I'll click into the feature service. We can see the summary that we set, the description, terms of use, the acknowledgements, the tags, and if I scroll up, we can see the title up here, which is editable. If I click into data, we should get an error because we simply do not have any layers or tables in this feature service. And we can see the loading error that we're getting down below here. If I click into settings, you'll see the default settings set. Later in this course, we will set content status and deletion management. We'll also play around with the editing options and allowing export. So we have successfully used the ArcGIS API for Python to create an empty feature service in ArcGIS Online. And we now have a content item for a feature service, where in upcoming videos we're going to show how we can access this item object and alter properties such as the summary, tags and description. We'll then of course move on to adding layers and tables. Make sure to continue on to the next video in this series and also make sure to subscribe. Take care.